Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a listener request, um, anger management journaling. You guys wanted this one. We're really going to dig in. You sent over some really cool stuff from a website called Lestallion. They've got like 50 journal prompts all about dealing with anger. And I know our listeners, they're all about practical knowledge, those
Yeah.
aha moments. So get ready because this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to break down these prompts. You know, my work is all about emotional regulation, helping people manage emotions effectively, and self-reflection through journaling is a huge part of that. So this is right up my alley.
Perfect. Now, Lestallion, their approach, it seems different. They're talking about transforming your relationship with anger, not just managing it. So what's the difference like in our everyday lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's subtle, but it's so important. You see, most of us, we see anger as this thing to suppress, right? Or we just got to vent it out.
Right.
But Lestallion, what they're saying is, what if we got curious about it?
Ooh, I like that.
Like, what if instead of just an obstacle, it's actually an opportunity for growth? And not just personal growth, but like becoming more empathetic toward others.
Okay, empathy. That's
Yeah.
huge, especially for, I'm guessing, a lot of our listeners,
All
right?
right.
So it's not just about me feeling better. It's about how I interact with like the whole world.
Exactly. And that's where these journal prompts come in. They're like a framework for self-reflection.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed when you're angry, your thoughts are just racing?
Oh, yeah.
Journaling, it forces you to slow down and really examine them.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, yeah. But they actually go even further, right? There's a whole section on anger triggers and healthy release. Some of these prompts are so specific. Like there's one, reflect on where you feel anger in your body. Why is that important?
Oh, I love that one. You know, we think of emotions as like just in our heads,
Yeah.
but they're physical too.
Yeah.
Like, think about it, that tightness in your chest, your jaw is clenched, your body's giving you signals often before you even realize you're angry.
Yeah.
And so this prompt, it helps you tune in to those physical cues.
Oh, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
I tend to be aware of my emotions pretty late in the game when it's a little bit harder to manage. You know what I mean? So this is like an early warning system almost.
You got it. And once you're aware of those physical sensations, then you can start using those techniques Lestallion outlines in their anger management basics section. It's about taking action, not just venting.
Speaking of action, there's a prompt about creating like a step-by-step plan for when anger comes up. And that's practical, which I know is important to our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. You know, it's one thing to journal about anger, but in the heat of the moment, that's when you need a plan.
Totally.
And this prompt, it encourages you to brainstorm coping mechanisms before you need them so you're prepared.
So we're not just reflecting on past anger, but we're actually prepping for future situations.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. And Lestallion provides actual techniques alongside those prompts, right?
They do, yeah. They mention deep breathing, for example. And from my experience working with clients, I highly recommend the 4-7-8 method.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
It's great. You breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. It's simple, but it really helps to regulate your nervous system.
I love that you're adding your own expertise to this. It's like our listeners are getting a personalized coaching session. Now, there's this other prompt that really stood out to me. It's the one about childhood, like exploring childhood experiences that might be at the root of anger. That feels kind of intense, I don't know, but also maybe really important.
It can be both, definitely. Our early experiences, you know, they really shape our emotional responses. And we don't even realize it half the time.
Right.
It could be a tone of voice, a certain scenario. They can trigger those old patterns. And then suddenly we have all this anger. And it feels totally out of proportion. Like, why am I so mad about this right now?
So it's like I'm not actually mad about like the dishes, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm tapping into some old script about feeling unheard or something.
Exactly. And by journaling about those childhood experiences, those patterns, you can start to untangle them from like your reactions today in the present.
That's powerful stuff. But it's not all about, digging into the negatives, right?
Mhm.
Lestallion also talks about living a positive life. So how does that tie into anger management?
Yeah, this is key. It's not about like pretending anger doesn't exist. It's about creating a life that you actually enjoy. When we prioritize ourselves, like when we do things that make us happy, nurture our passions, good people around us, it builds resilience.
Makes sense.
We're less likely to be like hijacked by anger in the first place.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But how do the Lestallion prompts actually address that?
They have a whole section on it. It's called Live a Positive Life Through Self-Care. And the prompts in there, they encourage you to really identify what brings you joy, what are you grateful for. They even say like, hey, take some of these anger prompts, right? But flip them around, focus on positive emotions instead.
Oh, I love that. So instead of what makes you feel angry,
Mm.
it's what makes you feel joyful.
Exactly. It's about perspective. We're training our brain to focus on the good even when things are tough. Gratitude journaling, especially, that's powerful for your emotional well-being.
Yeah, I can see that. So we're basically building up those positive muscles, but at the same time, we're like understanding the anger too, right? This is feeling less like a chore now, more like a whole life upgrade, which I love.
That's the goal. And remember, they're prompts, they're starting points. You can adapt them, make them your own, be creative. The important thing is that it works for you, right? It helps you have a healthier relationship with anger.
Speaking of what works, there's this other prompt. It's about practicing forgiveness. And I'll admit, this one, I'm always a little skeptical. How does that even work with anger?
I hear you. Forgiveness, it can be tough, especially when we feel like, hey, my anger is valid. But it's not about saying what they did was okay. It's about you. It's about releasing yourself from that anger, the resentment. That stuff can be so draining.
It's more about like self-care than about like letting the other person off the hook.
Exactly. And the prompts from Lestallion, they encourage you to explore that. What does forgiveness look like for you? No judgment, no pressure.
That's helpful. I think a lot of times we avoid forgiveness because we think it has to look a certain way,
Yeah.
but everybody's different. Everyone's journey is different.
Absolutely. And journaling, that can be your safe space to process those tough emotions without judgment.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of this anger onion, right? All these different techniques, different approaches. But what about like putting it all into practice? Lestallion gives us all these great prompts and techniques, but how do we actually use them in our lives? How do we make sure they're not just stuck in our journals?
Right. Like, how do we really live this stuff? That's the million-dollar question.
Mhm.
Honestly, it takes practice. It's like learning any new skill,
Mm.
right? You wouldn't expect to, like, play the piano perfectly after one lesson.
Totally.
Be patient with yourself. Just keep showing up, keep practicing.
So it's about consistency then, not getting discouraged if you have a bad day or anything.
Exactly. And that's another thing journaling is good for. You can track your progress. You look back, and even if it doesn't feel like you've made much progress, when you see it written down, it can be really encouraging.
Oh, that's a really good point. It's like you have a record. You're not just relying on your memory, which, let's be honest, isn't always that great, especially not when we're feeling emotional about something.
Right. And, as you're looking back at those old entries, pay attention to if you see any patterns. Maybe there's a certain time of day when you're more prone to anger or a specific situation that always seems to set you off. That kind of awareness, that's huge.
Yeah, it's like those insights. They give you a map for how to deal with those situations better in the future.
Wow, this deep dive has been incredible. I feel like we really went beyond just like, here's a list of prompts.
Me too. We explored the why behind it all, the science behind why anger management journaling works and how those little prompts, they can create some really big changes in how we connect with ourselves and with other people. Yeah. And for our listener who's all about practical takeaways and aha moments, which is like all of you, by the way, I think we delivered on that today.
I think so too. Remember, it's about what works for you. Try the prompts, adapt them, make them your own. But most importantly, approach this whole thing with self-compassion. You're on the right track just by being here, listening to this, and being willing to explore.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing all your expertise with us. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure. Truly, it's been a great conversation.
And for everyone listening, if you want to go even deeper with these prompts, make sure you check out that website, Lestallion. We'll be sure to link it in the show notes. Until next time, keep those journals handy, keep exploring all those feelings, and keep diving deep.